This episode is sponsored by AireCon, one of the UK's finest analogue gaming festivals, taking place at the Harrogate Convention Centre between the 13th to the 15th of March next year. Tickets are on sale now. Check out the website, which is aircon.uk, or check out our links in the show notes for more information. Welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for September. Now it's getting cold and I'm slightly out of breath because it's getting a little bit of cold. Joining me today is a man who he's just taken who he is and he's wearing it as a badge of pride. You know, he's just taken ownership. People have said nerd. He's like, I'm not a nerd. You know, people said, yeah, but you like to stay in your basement. He says, yes, I do. And he says, you're starting to get married. He says, yes, I am. You're starting to have kids. Yes, I am as well. You're turning into a geek dad. And he certainly is. Because joining me, I've got Jonathan Liu from GeekDad. And things have happened. And we're going to talk about them today. But first of all, hello, Jonathan. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, Richard. I'm doing pretty well.
It's good to have you on. This has been one of those things that's been kind of going back and forward for a little while, and but we're here. And we're here to have a chat, and we're here to have a conversation. Yeah. And we're going to have a little conversation about yourself. But for everybody who hasn't listened to us for the first time, thank you very much for joining us. The reason that we do this is quite simply because there's still not enough podcasts out there about board games and tabletop. Just can't find them. And the other reason that we do them is because it's my ongoing journey to seek out No, that's Star Trek. It's my own ongoing journey to interview and speak to as many people in the industry as possible. And me and Jonathan have been side-swerving each other, and it's kind of been looking, it's like seeing somebody at work that you kind of want to say hello, and you haven't, and you kind of have a nod, an acknowledgement as you pass them in the corridor. And then one day I've just grabbed him by his shoulders and I went, we need to talk. And he's went, okay. And then it's like, let's try and organise it. And it's like, but the timing, it's very, very difficult to get around it. So here we are. So there you go.
Here we are.
Growing up, because let's just get into it. Let's just start chewing on this juicy steak. Were you kind of a games family? I mean, did you have the kind of sit around the table, play games together? Did you do a lot of kind of family activities together and stuff like that as you were kind of growing up yourself?
You know, I think we were kind of typical in that we had a lot of your classic, we had a copy of Monopoly and Scrabble and Game of Life. I played mostly with my siblings, my sister and my brother. With my parents and my grandmother, we would play cards. So we played a lot of classic card games. Okay. And we also played a little bit of mahjong every so often. It wasn't a frequent thing, but it was something every so often we would get out the mahjong set, and my parents would try to walk us all through the various intricacies of scoring mahjong, which is a kind of a game in itself. And it's funny to me because it's like they would explain, okay, you have this hand, so everyone owes you this much, and we would try to figure out how they got that amount, and it turns out it's all exponents.
Yes.
And we were like, oh, well, when you're a kid, you don't understand what they're talking about. Plus, it's all, it was explained in Chinese, and I didn't know what was going on. But we played, classic games, but not not heavily. I do remember, like, my dad didn't play a lot of the board games with us, and there was one day I was home with him for some reason. Nobody else was home, and I said, "Hey, I've got, the game of Risk.
Yeah.
Let's play this. I'll teach you how to play Risk." I've never finished the game yet, and we sat down. I taught him to play, and I think 45 minutes later, he had defeated me entirely.
Wow.
And that was, I think, the only time I actually finished a game of Risk as a kid.
Did you go back and play it? I mean, was this something you did then again and again? Did you continue to play with your dad on a regular basis? Or would you go back to, was that like one of these one-off kind of specials? Because that sounds like a special memory to you, pretty much.
That was, I would say, Risk was a one-off. My dad was is an avid chess player, and so he would teach us chess, and we would sit down and play chess with him.
Okay.
Again, you would not win at chess against my dad, but I think had a little more, a little more fun, playing that and learning new strategies than the. I think I didn't really get him hooked on Risk with that one game. Was he a kind of dad who would let you win a couple of games, or was he the kind of dad that the only way you're going to learn this is if I kick your ass 15 games in the trot to the point where I'm checkmating you in 7 moves, and you're just going, I just moved my pawn, and you're like, kind of thing. I don't think he necessarily would make things easy on us, but he would definitely point out, if you're making a move and he goes, all right, like, let me tell you what might happen if you make that move. And, all right, do you want to take that move back? Okay, let's try something else. We'd play somewhere he might spot you, a couple pieces, right? And say, here, why don't we start and I'm short, a knight this time, or I'm short a bishop, and we'll see how you do with that.
Is he?
But
do you still play? I mean, is he still? I mean, first of all, is he? I mean, do you get a chance to play, or is he? Is that not so? Is he passed away, or is he still around? Or
he is still around. He's still playing chess. It's fun now. He's been playing chess with my kids, so that's kind of a fun point of connection. Is getting to. Getting to see my dad play chess with my kids and them experiencing a little bit of, what I grew up with.
Has he made them cry yet then? Does he kind of like, don't want to go and see Granddad now. He kind of, every time he kind of beats us, and then he beats us at chess, and then he starts throwing the bishop at us, and we have to run away, kind of thing. But no, I mean, that's a kind of a nice little bonding experience, because chess is like, it's focused between two people, isn't it? I mean, it's not like a group game like your Monopolies and this world. It is just kind of a nice little moment.
You haven't seen chess. You haven't seen chess the way my kids play it. I mean, sometimes it is a group game.
It'll be one of these things where, yes, they're meant to be playing chess with each other against your grandfather, but there's been instances where they have ended up fighting with each other because they can't decide which move they're going to be making, and he's just sitting there going, the enemy is defeating itself. I have to do nothing more here. I can just walk away and come back, and then just stop them when the crying starts. Did chess take up was that just something in the background? I mean, did you play chess quite regularly at like school and stuff like that again, or was it just something that you and your dad kind of would occasionally sit down and play together?
I think it was more of an occasional thing. I didn't get heavily into chess. It's something where, I know the basic rules. I can hold my own against my 6-year-old, but I never got really good at learning some of the moves that you're supposed to know to be good at chess. I'm more of the, I can think about 3 turns in advance, and that's about it. So very, very basic chess player.
You know, I'm still castle, and here's the horsey, and, you know, I'm still struggling with which space do you put the king and the queen on when you set the board up. My son, we went through a phase of kind of playing chess kind of on and off, and he just destroyed me every single time, to the point where it's like, well, we're gonna learn a different game instead. Buckaroo, I can win at Buckaroo. You know, I can load up that mule all day long before it kicks itself off into the sky. He didn't like that game kind of at all. Did you stay with the game playing kind of through school? I mean, do you remember kind of, was the game playing still kind of going on? Were you the type of person you kind of dropped it when things got kind of interesting at college, and then kind of jump back into the hobby at a later date? I mean, yeah,
it's kind of the latter there. I played games, then video games came along. You know, high school came along, and I didn't play quite as many board games. Still played some card games from time to time. Mm-hmm. And when I got to college, I knew some people who played Risk or other board games in college, but I didn't really spend a lot of time playing games other than, couple card games. Mm-hmm. Got into Set, got introduced to Set, and so there were some people who really enjoyed that one, and I got heavily into that. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until after college, a couple years after college, I had moved out here to Portland and met some people who introduced me to the sort of story you've heard a lot, right? Settlers of Catan and Carcassonne.
I'm sure there's a dealer. There's a dealer going about. Yeah. And you know what? He's tried to sell hash, yeah. He's tried to sell cannabis. And he's just not good at it. And then he's discovered one day he's down on his luck, yeah. And he's come across a carton in the back alley, and there's boxes of Catan in it. And he's gone around and says, well, maybe I can deal with this instead and start people off on a slight, and that's how the empire's built. This is just a drug dealer that, if he'd went the wrong direction, he would have ended up dealing cocaine, and instead he's dealing cardboard. I mean, that's how these things kind of happen. What was it you did at college?
I studied math. Partly because I didn't know what I was going to do after college, and I'd always been okay at math. Mm-hmm. And then by the time I found out that math was not what I thought it was when I first started, I was halfway through, and I said, well, I might as well just finish this up.
What kind of stuff? What kind of math can you do? Because the thing about you Americans, okay, it's maths. Whichever way you look at it, it's never math. It's not a singular thing. It's lots of numbers and stuff. It's maths. It's mathematics. It's an S on the end.
It's mathematics, and then they just cut off the mathematics.
You got it wrong. It's maths. There's no math. Anyway, was there anything you specialised in? Kind of like, when you were studying?
No. For undergrad, I majored. It was just called pure math. Mm-hmm. No S. And so it was not even applied mathematics. It was the sort of very theoretical. You take number theory and topology, and you get to the point where numbers are not involved anymore, and that's kind of where
I saw that.
Where I felt a little misled. And said, "Oh, I was really good at algebra and calculus." Yeah. And once we got into group theory and topology, is where I realized that I'm not really a math person. I'm a calculus and algebra person.
Because they start doing dots and stuff, don't they? And look, here's a vector, and you take this, and this, and then here's dy, dx, x. I'm just like, I'm just looking for anything that could look like a 4 or a 5 here.
So, yeah, that's, and that's, I think, that's kind of where I got a little bit lost. Mm-hmm. But I finished it out. I did earn a math degree, and haven't really used it in 20 years.
There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's a lot of people. I think maybe 20 or 30 years ago, even longer than that, folk would have been going, for shame, you've wasted your education. But nowadays they're like, yeah, me too. You know, I've got a degree in kind of various different sciences. You know, this is not a podcast about chemistry or physics or biology. You know, we're not talking about covalent bonds here. We're talking about board games and cardboard. So it's good to see that degree kind of served me kind of well. But you said you moved to Portland. Was that a career move, or was that just let's go and see what else is out there?
It was a career move for my wife.
Right.
We got married shortly after college.
Oh, right, okay.
And she went to medical school in Kansas while I worked a couple different jobs. Uh-huh. And then we moved out to Portland for residency. So that was our both of us our first time out here in the Pacific Northwest, and we fell in love with it. And we did move away for her first job out of residency, and then got a chance to come back to Portland about 8 years ago. And so we did.
Cool. And was that, and as you were saying, that was around the time that you started to hang around with the undesirables and got yourself into Catan and Carcassonne. I take it you didn't get onto tell me you didn't go anywhere near Lords of Waterdeep.
Well, that was before Lords of Waterdeep. No. So, you know, I did experience Lords of Waterdeep when it came out. A friend of mine had that, but that was a couple of years later. I got, you know, really, I would say Carcassonne was probably my favorite at the time. I really enjoyed that one, and it's of those classics, one of the few that I still play regularly.
Did the collection start to grow after then? I mean, did you start to get your own collection together? Was it a case that everybody's kind of bringing something along to game night, and then the collection slowly creeped up from a couple of spaces on the shelf to like an entire cupboard, and then a basement, and then, you know, its own room and stuff like that? Was it one of the things that kind of sneaked up on you as you went?
Yeah, it encouraged me to go back and get some of my old games out of my parents' my parents' house. Found a couple of those that I hadn't had in a while, and I started looking at looking into game stores, but I also liked looking for things at thrift shops and looking for old strange games. But I think that the collection wasn't really huge at the time. It wasn't until when we moved back to Kansas. We went to a very small town, about 800 people.
Yeah, and
I brought my at the time modest board game collection with me, and realized that most of the people there were in the same situation I was when I was a kid, which is they'd heard of Monopoly and Life and Scrabble, and had never heard of these games that I was bringing with me, and so I got involved with a lot of the local like middle schoolers and high schoolers who in a small town didn't really have a lot to do in the evenings and weekends. And they were like, hey, this is kind of neat. Let's play board games. And that's also the time when I started writing for GeekDad and reviewing games. And that's, and then, that's when the game collection really started growing. So
was GeekDad something already in existence in the background before you joined then? Yeah. And kind of how did that kind of come about? How did you get involved and meet up with them and make that jump?
Yeah, so the story of GeekDad is that it was originally started by Chris Anderson, who was the editor-in-chief of Wired magazine. Mm-hmm. He started it as a side project. He was working on some drones with his kids, and he wanted a place to just kind of share some of the projects they were doing. And so he started up this site called GeekDad.
Yeah.
Ran it for, I don't know, a year or two, I guess. And then he handed it off to Ken Denmead, who has been running it since then. And when I was, so I had been reading the site for a couple years, and they had put out a call for new writers. They said, "Hey, we've got room for some new people, and send us a little bit about yourself. What are your interests? What do you like? What do you want to write about?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I'm living in rural Kansas. I like board games. That's what I'd like to write about." And at the time, they didn't have a ton of board game coverage. They had a couple people writing sporadic reviews.
Yeah.
And I think they didn't have any stay-at-home parents at the time. So they said, "Okay, well, we'll give you a shot." And that's how I got involved. And I immediately started, writing about books and board games and what it's like being a dad. And over the years, I've really sort of focused in on the board games and books.
I mean, talking about bringing up the kind of the stay-at-home dad side of things, was that a relatively easy decision to make, Ken, at the time? I take it obviously your wife was then a kind of a doctor, so I take it you had the financial security. So does it just make sense at the time for you to be staying at home? And how have you, and how have you found that? Has it been, because a lot of people say, well, looking after children is the hardest job you can ever have. And do you find it are you feel rewarded by what you've been doing? Do you get people saying stupid things like, "Oh, are you babysitting today?" or something like that? Because I get that when I'm with my kids. But
sure, I would say it wasn't an easy decision, but it was a decision that we made well in advance of actually having kids. So
all right.
My story was I grew up very conservative. I had the stereotype idea that the man should work at a job and the woman should stay home and take care of kids, and I met my wife and she said, "Well, I'm studying to be a doctor, so good luck with that." and I had to do a lot of thinking. I was like, well, if this is the person I want to marry and we want to have kids, she's not going to stay home with them. Is that something I want to do, or is it something that are we both going to work and we'll have a nanny or childcare or whatever? And we talked a lot about it, and by the time we were married, we had said, "Hey, here's our rough plan: is we'll work once she's in residency and is actually earning an income instead of spending money on med school. We'll try for kids, and if we happen to have kids, then I'll stay home with them and give that a shot." So I had a lot of time to prepare for that moment, and it has worked out. So I've been staying home for nearly 16 years now.
Wow.
And we've got 3 kids, and I think it is hard. It's not for everyone, right? Like being a stay-at-home parent is not for everyone. But it's also been rewarding for me. And I think it's definitely been good for our relationship in the way that her job and her financial security allows me the privilege to stay home.
Yeah.
Which has allowed me to do things like write for GeekDad. And then my staying home has allowed her to go to work and not, to be able to do some travel that's associated with work. And be, comfortable with the fact that, hey, there's somebody competent at home taking care of the kids, knowing that she's not, she doesn't have to do all of the, sort of shuttling kids back and forth to appointments in school, because I got that covered.
Is there less, do you think there's like kind of less pressure? Do you feel kind of less pressure to be the kind of the breadwinner of the house and stuff like that? I mean, because I know if some people would say, well, like you're saying, there'd be a lot of conservative people would say, well, what is he doing that for? And it's like, well, I'm not being funny, but if I was in your situation, Jonathan, I'd be doing exactly the same. I'd be doing exactly the same, because I have got, there's lots of other things I would like to be able to do. And I have very, I guess, not strange views, but I would like it to get back to the days where you didn't need to have two parents working through necessity. I think there's a lot of kids that could do with just having either or parent kind of kicking about the castle for somebody picking them up and not a childminder, to have, to not worry about school holidays and days off and things like that. So, from where you're coming from, it seems like a decent kind of situation. As time's going on, and as the kids are getting to the age where they're approaching they're going through kind of grade school and then they're heading into high school, are you going to be looking into kind of jobs, or as Geek Dad kind of, does that kind of, I don't know if you get paid a little bit for Geek Dad or if there's a financial arrangement for that, but does doing Geek Dad, does that give you a little bit of financial kind of backing as well?
Not really.
Right. Okay.
We do get a small stipend.
Right.
I would say it is small enough. I would say the amount that I earn in a year on GeekDad is probably what I could spend on Kickstarter in a month.
Right. Okay.
So, primarily, what I think what writing for GeekDad does for me is that it scratches that itch of having, colleagues, right? Having doing something that gives me a little bit of purpose outside of raising kids and doing household chores, and it has definitely opened up a lot of opportunities for me.
Yeah.
Being involved in in the world of tabletop games, but it's not a I think of it as my full-time hobby and not really a job. Mm-hmm. But as the kids get older, I don't necessarily think I'm going to go out and look for a job just because as they become self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I think if an opportunity came along, once they're old enough, it's something I could consider.
Okay.
But we are very fortunate that it's not a necessity.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, for my wife and for my family, I think there's enough value in having me be available, to go do grocery shopping and make sure, we can cook supper and have errands done, during the day. There's enough value in that sort of those kind of like small things that pile up. Mm-hmm. That I think, if I were working a full-time job, our evenings and weekends would just be full of, would be full of a lot of chores. And, so I think we're, it's not something I'm actively looking for or planning to look for.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, again, it's kind of like interesting. I think I saw a tweet the other day talking about, somebody saying that, well, I just can't seem to keep my house in order. There's always stuff needing done. And it's like, well, that's because when your parents and your grandparents were growing up, you only needed one person going out for the wage, which meant the other person could stay at home and get all the kind of the chores done. in terms of you being a stay-at-home dad, is there other stay-at-home dads where you are? I mean, did you find, have you been able to mix with the other, are you officially a soccer mum, as I guess is what, do you have your honorary soccer mum badge? Kind of thing, or I mean, was that a different? Again, that's a difficult dynamic. I know, from personal experience to kind of break into as well.
So when my oldest was first born, I was part of a group of parents that was we were all partners of other medical residents.
Yeah.
So all of these people who knew what it was like to have a partner who was never home, working all the time, and we all had young kids, and so we would get together and have play dates, get our kids together. This was before most of them were in school, and that was definitely very valuable to me. But it was predominantly moms. There were, I think, 3 dads in the group, and what we found was, that at least the dads who were in this group were all kind of homebodies. We were all people who were okay hanging out with our kids at home by ourselves for the most part. And so there was this inertia to overcome to say, I'm going to go and spend time with other parents, as opposed to I'm just going to kind of get stuck at home and in my routines. And I think, I did meet a couple stay-at-home dads through that. But when we moved to Kansas, I was the only stay-at-home dad. Nobody kind of really knew.
I can imagine that.
And we were there for a couple years. But that's when I got into writing for GeekDad. And I think that gave me sort of a connection with a lot of people that I really like to hang out with, even if it was only online. And so moving back to Portland, I would say I've met a few stay-at-home dads, but it's not been it's not always been easy to connect with other stay-at-home dads, and partly it's because we're all running errands during the day, and then we don't get to hang out at night because we're getting our kids ready to bed. So it ironically, even though I'm a parent, most of the people who come over to my house for game nights either don't have kids or they have older kids that they don't need to. It's not the stay-at-home dads mostly who are coming to my game nights
because they're having to stay at home because they can't go because they've got the little one in bed and they can't just sneak out and say I'm away for a couple of hours. I'll keep the baby monitor with me, kind of thing. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it's it's like when my brother. I met up with my friend recently the weekend that we haven't seen in a while, and he's got a new baby as his first one. And the thing was, we really need to organise kind of like a game night. And it's like, well, I'm obviously coming round to yours. And it's like, because otherwise him and his wife have got to arrange a babysitter. They've got to come around here. There are going to be phone calls to make sure that because they're little ones. He's very, very young, and they'll be making sure he's settled. And then it'll get to about 10 o'clock, and it's like, they'll probably need to go home to kind of take over from the babysitter or whoever's house house sitting at the time. And I'm like, but we're only started the second round of Twilight Imperium. Won't you come back? But yeah, I can understand that. So it's a lot easier for me to go there because my boy, he'll be in bed and that'll be it. I don't have to kind of worry about feeds and stuff and kind of thing, and kind of things like that. With regards then to having kind of going back to your story, and you were playing, obviously you were occasional mahjong, a little bit of chess, has that then allowed you, having access to the games that you're getting from GeekDad, has that allowed you to start playing some of the, what you would call the more modern games with your kids, or did they just think that's daddy's funny hobby and leave me alone kind of thing. Have your kids taken an interest in board games? Have you been able to kind of take them down the modern route and say, hey, let's look at King of Tokyo and, Rhino Hero Super Battle and games like that, as opposed to them just sitting around a table and playing Monopoly with you?
Yes. It has been, it's been a lot of fun. My kids, like all three of them, have gotten, has had some experience playing board games with me.
Yeah.
My oldest plays a little less now. She's more of the social social gamer. So she's the one who says, well, if there are people there that I want to hang out with, then I might come down and play board games with you.
Yeah.
My middle daughter is like me, where it's like, if there's games to be had, I will come down and play games, and I don't care who's there.
Yeah, cool.
And then my youngest, there's a bit of a gap there because she's only in first grade now. But she's the one who's sort of grown up entirely surrounded by games.
Yeah.
The other two saw me get into games, right? Like from when they were born is when I started getting into gaming. And so they've seen the collection grow. And my youngest is the one who stepped into this, sort of, oh yeah, like you play games and this is what you do. And so I think she's already pretty sharp. And I think by the time she's in middle school, she's the sort that's going to be beating my dad at chess. And so she loves games too. And I'll often let her play games that are, well above her age level, because she can follow the rules, even if she can't come up with strategies, right? She can't plan out how to win the game, but she can follow the rules and take her turn, and she enjoys doing that. And so, so definitely, we do play a lot of games with my kids as well as with, a lot of other friends. So that's something that I've definitely enjoyed, having that to share with them. And they do get a little tired sometimes of the fact that we're playing a new game and not the one that they played last week.
Yes, I was gonna say that, because you cover quite a lot of ground on the site. You do kind of like Kickstarter. You do a few Kickstarter games as well as kind of like some published games. So I'm taking it that there is. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you have a pile which is that I'm getting this played to get this written up, and then is there a pile to say, well, actually the kids really, really like that one, so we're going to hang that and kind of keep a hold of that on the kind of the shelf?
There definitely is a pile that I'm always trying to get through for reviews. Fortunately, I try to be kind of selective in which ones I end up with, to review, to say, okay, I think my kids would like this one. Let's give it a shot. Or I think my friends will like this one.
Yeah.
We're gonna give that one a shot. And I think the nice thing is that they're now old enough that they're also able to go, we're going to, like, Dad's busy doing this game that he has to review and we don't want to play it. So we can pull this other game off the shelf and play it ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's, and I think that's starting to happen, where they're realizing, like, they don't need my permission to go and play a game, that they like. They can go and enjoy a game even if I'm not there. And so that's pretty fun too. Like my, sometimes if they have friends over, they'll come down and play a game and say, hey, we're going to come down and play board games, without Dad. And that brings me a lot of delight, just to be able to see that they're also sharing, their love of games with their friends.
Have you ever had to sit around with them and play a bit of a stinker of a game? As in, have you ever kind of like got halfway through and went, kids, okay, I'll tell you what, right? If you behave well enough for the rest of the day, we'll put this game away right now. However, if you misbehave, I'm going to leave this bad boy on the table, and we're going to come back and we're going to play it for the next 3 hours straight, again and again and again. I mean, have you ever had that where you're kind of like, this is could be better, and I'm really kind of, I'd rather make my kids eat Marmite than kind of play this.
I think there are definitely games that I've played that I didn't enjoy or they didn't enjoy. But I don't sit down and make my kids play games that they're just they think are terrible. Now, I will say, generally, you don't quit the middle of a game. We're gonna see it through. But I'm also not playing, sort of 3-hour games with the kids. So generally, it's like, it's if you don't like it, it'll be over soon, and you don't need to play again, and your feedback will be taken into account. and then I may end up playing with some adult friends or something, just to try to get through other things. I think it's more common that my kids latch onto a game that I don't like.
Right. Okay.
And those are a little tricky, right? Because it's like, all right, this is a game that my kids are really enjoying. I just don't happen to enjoy playing it myself. And so then I have to make the decision of, that'll be a special treat. I'll sit down and play this game with you. And
I mean, would you approach it? Say if you were in that situation with regards to kind of like writing the review, and do you get, if it was the case that the kids really, really liked the game, but you thought, actually, this is hitting so far off the mark for me, I can't even talk about it. Do you, in terms of the kind of like the review stuff, are you allowed to look at it from the kids' point of view, to look at it from their angle? Or are you always encouraged to look at it from the dad's angle, as I say, it's kind of like the geek, the geek dad thing? Right.
I think, what I try to do at Geek Dad is, I'm always taking into account that I'm a parent, and a lot of our readers are parents. Not everyone, obviously. You can come read hopefully, if you're not a parent, you can still read my game reviews and get something out of them. But I always do try to include things like, how appropriate is it for kids, if it's intended for kids. And so if my kids love a game and I can't stand it, that is something that I would mention in a review. And part of it is, I understand that some games were not designed for adults, to appeal to adults.
Yeah.
But I think as long as I don't think it's bad for kids to be playing a game, I will probably say, look, this is something that your kid will probably love, and you will just have to sit through and endure it until they outgrow it, right? But yeah, and if that's something where you're saying, oh, I'm looking for something that my kid really wants to do, that might help steer you in that direction. And if you're like, well, you know what, my kid doesn't like that sort of thing, then hey, well, I probably won't either. Yeah. We can give that one a pass. I think I can't always predict like what audience is going to like a game, but I can usually at least find something to say, this is the sort of audience that would enjoy playing this, and this is a sort of audience that should steer clear of it. And hopefully my goal in writing a review isn't just for you to know whether or not I liked it.
Yeah.
It's more useful if you can read my review and by the end of it know whether or not you're going to like it.
Do you ever, I run the blog for the network, and we have a brilliant writer, Steve, that's on that writes for us as well. Is there, in terms of, if I don't like a game and if I want to put up a review to say to people, I don't like this game, if I get like a bad game that I don't like, I can just put it up and that's fine, it's cool. And if Steve wants to do the same, because there's a brand with the GeekDad brand, do you have control over it kind of editorially, what you're going to be putting on the site? Does it get passed by kind of other people as well? And and to that effect, would you kind of like, do you generally get a choice of games that you would play? So you would generally say, well, I'm not going to select this game because I know it's not going to be a kind of a fit for me kind of thing.
Yeah, so we have a number of reviewers on the site. Yeah. I'm one of the editors, so I do get a look at, you know, what people are writing, and I can kind of give a little bit of guidance. Mm-hmm. One of our other longtime writers, Dave Banks, was our games editor up until the beginning of this year, and he's stepped down, but he was another person who would kind of say, "Hey, let me take a look at what you're writing. Yeah. Let me make sure you're kind of not to say you need to write in a particular voice." But to say that, you know, we have sort of a standard we'd like to set for what we publish, and we want to make sure that, you know, your review is up to those standards, right? Like that people can read it and it's more than just, you know, a paragraph of text that said, "Hey, I liked it. It was fun." Period. Yeah. So in terms of you know, what types of things we publish, you know, we don't have we give people a lot of leeway in what they can say. What I try to do is say, you know, if you play a game and you have a really bad experience with it, I encourage people not to write that based on a single play, because there's so much that can go wrong in one play of a game that, you know, writing a comprehensive review and saying, like, I don't want to try this again, so I'm just going to write it up and say it's terrible. I think that's not fair to the reader, and it's not fair to the publisher. And I usually say, you know, well, make sure you check in with the publisher and see if there are things you did wrong. And if it is just not for you, well, then you can write that as well. But we're trying to, I think, I like to think of myself as a game curator, where the idea is, you know, if you came over to my house and you said, "Hey, show me a game I should play," I'm not going to start by pulling a bunch of games off the shelf and saying, "Well, you really shouldn't play this one, and here's why." Because there's so many games that I do love. I don't have time to tell you about all of them. You know, why should I spend the time writing up a couple thousand words on why I don't like this game or that game, unless I can find some sort of redeeming quality in it. And so that's what I try to do, is I look for the ones that say, here, you know, I want to focus on helping people find games that they're going to love. And if there's something that I don't love, you know, if I think there's an audience out there for it, I'll write about it. If I think, you know, this game just falls totally flat, that's something I will tell the publisher and designer and say, you know, this just does not work for us. It's not something I'm comfortable sharing with my readers. And usually, you know, people say, okay, that's fair. But we do occasionally, people have folks who say, well, I'd like you to write about it anyway. In which case, you know, I try to write a review that explains why, you know, what I didn't like about it, without being, you know, nasty or mean.
Yeah, I think there's scope for that. I think I'm not banging the same drum. I've talked about kind of educating people and letting them understand a standard. And there's, you know, I'm an old man that rants at the crowd at the best of times, and I don't want to continue to be the guy that rants at the crowd at the best of times anyway. And I think some people just want to know, is this going to be suitable for me, and am I going to have a good time? Is there any games at the moment that you're looking at that you're kind of like going, I really like this. This has kind of captured me and surprised me, and I'm kind of really, really it's kind of making you shiver all over, and you get a smile on your face and a spring in your step when you're thinking about it, Jonathan? Any games like that at the moment?
There's one small one that's coming to Kickstarter soon, that I saw at Gen Con, and I keep talking about it.
Okay.
Called Slip Strike.
Okay.
It's from Junk Spirit Games, designed by David Gerard. And it's just this little 2-player card game. And I don't typically go in for a lot of 2-player only games because I usually have more than 2 players. So I don't get a chance to play 2-player only games. But I played this prototype at Gen Con and I liked it. And then I just got a prototype sent to me a couple weekends ago, and I took it to a local convention and showed it to a lot of people, played it a couple times myself. And it's just sort of really slick, small, easy to learn game that's very much a kind of a mental battle, right? You're trying to figure out what the other person's going to do. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to figure out what you're gonna do. But it's a duel between 2 teleporting time travelers. And it's programmed movement. You just program your next 2 moves and you resolve them. And if you get hit, that's when you say, no, I'm a teleporting time traveler, and you back up and you teleport somewhere else. But eventually you run out of teleport cards and then you get hit.
That just sounds like but I do like a quick game. I must admit, I like something that kind of could just set up and play. I had the joy of playing a game called Carbon City Zero, which is coming onto Kickstarter probably in a couple of days by the time this is going out. And that's just that. It's kind of like environmental Star Realms. Just the way it's going, and it's a lovely little kind of game which talks about renewable energy, and I'm aware of Dave and his work with Junks, but it was a Battle of the Bards.
Battle of the Bards. He
says going up the octave. Yes, I'm aware of his work. Is there anything? I mean, have you? I take it you're on a few kind of distributor lists and stuff like that. Do you get access to the wonders of things like Tapestry and stuff like that, or do you need to wait like us mere mortal men to get access to those things?
So I am supposed to be getting a copy of Tapestry, but it'll be, I think it's arriving in the same wave as the pre-orders.
Yeah.
I was not one of the lucky few who got the pre-launch copies. Mm-hmm. But we do have we've had a pretty good relationship with Stonemaier Games in the past, and so we have reviewed several of their titles. I'm on some distributor lists. I'm definitely on a lot of email lists, and so we try to, I think going back to one of the questions you asked earlier, is when people send us a pitch for a game, we do try to circulate that among our writers and say, okay, like who's going to be a good fit for this game?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times where reading a description, I can look at a game and say, okay, this is definitely not for me. But the nice thing about having a group of writers is maybe someone else is really going to love that, and I'd rather have them cover it than me slog through it and have to put off writing about some other game that I really like. Yeah, so we do we do get games from a number of different publishers, and I think some of those are a lot of those are ones where we've been writing about board games for many years now, and so that we've got relationships with them. But there's always also a lot of changeover in the reps at the publishers, and so there's a lot of times where we have a long-standing relationship with someone, and that person leaves, and we're starting over again.
Yeah, and you have to build it up and kind of let them know. I'm lucky that I'm generally quite annoying anyway, so I can't see me building up any relationship with a publisher. I think sometimes what they do is they say, I'll speak to somebody and then I'll send them an email and then I'll get a reply from somebody else saying, oh, they've left. I get that. I get that a lot. I don't know why that is, but I mean, obviously with you continuing to write for Geek Dad, you're in a kind of you could say you could be a bit judgmental at times, which is potentially why you are now getting involved with the American Tabletop Awards of America, if I'm right. Tell us about, because this is new, this is hot off the press, this is like, there's still somebody that's going at it with a cloth and buffing it up a bit, but this is like a brand new thing. This must be exciting for you to have, kind of like, because we wouldn't have an award in Scotland because somebody would steal it. But I mean, this is a new venture that you guys are kind of getting into, and you've got some big names getting involved in it. How did that come about? I mean, has that been something that's been spoken about for some time?
So it was just revealed yesterday, which is it was a September 16th. Yeah. That's when we launched the website and turned on all the social media channels and announced our first set of winners, which is actually for 2018 2018 releases. Yeah. And that is a little later in the year than we intended, but we're hoping, for future years to release that a little earlier in the year. So we'll start working on 2019 releases fairly soon. And, we always want to allow a little bit of time for those games that get published right at the end of the year. Yeah. But we're hoping to work on that for next year. So it was not, it was something that we've been working on since, I guess, the beginning of this year, beginning of 2019, but was not really talked about, I guess, publicly until yesterday's release. So that was so for most people in the board game world, it really came out of nowhere. Because that was really the first that we've shared publicly about it. Yeah. And I was invited to join the committee by Eric Yurko, who does What's Eric Playing?
Yes. And
I think he's definitely one of the driving forces behind the whole idea. And I'm really excited to be part of this group. I think they've put together, trying to put together a wide range of voices from mostly board game media, so reviewers and podcasters and bloggers, video creators, and we've basically had a lot of discussions about what we get to nominate games, and then we vote on games. And there's been a lot of discussion about how to categorize games, because I think no matter how you do it, people are going to be unhappy with the limitations of categories when it comes to board games. We've already seen, I think I've seen some people say, well, why only 4? How can you encapsulate all board games in 4 categories? And I said, well, you can't really, but that's already one more category than the Spiel des Jahres has. So I don't think we're going to. I would have just said 12 categories.
I would have just said to them, look, if you all keep bitching about it, we're going to reduce it by 1 category for every 100 complaints, and you're going to end up with 1 category, and we're going to be judging every game on 1 category instead. Yeah, so there you go. And it's going to be whether or not it's a game or if it's art, and we're just going to throw it to you and let you just argue about it yourself. It's interesting. You're right, you can't. Yeah. It's difficult because it's kind of like the same reason as why I can't see ever a realistic kind of Metacritic ever taking part in kind of board games, because it's all about experience as opposed to always sticking a number maybe on the end of it. And people could say, well, let's talk about a strategic game. And you could say, well, I could put Star Realms in there, but I could also put Scythe in there. And, at the same end, and they're completely different games. But, again, it's kind of like, what kind of games come up when you throw something like there, like a strategic game. And then you'll obviously get people with their first thoughts coming up and saying, well, this is what we think. And you kind of judge it. Mm-hmm. You kind of judge it from there. Do you think the awards are more important just for people to get some recognition? Because I think there's really only one that everybody talks about, which is, people talk about the Spiel des Jahres. I know that, various cons hand out awards at the time. The UK Games Expo hands out awards to like game of the show and stuff like that. But do you think that this is maybe a little bit kind of overdue, that we need to start recognising the talent that there is in the industry?
I don't want to speak for the whole committee, but I think one of the visions for the American Tabletop Awards is simply the fact that there are a lot of countries who are starting to say, hey, Germany has a Game of the Year award, and that's really cool. But why don't we have one too? And I think, not to say that, we speak for all American tabletop media, but that we wanted to have an award that was based on American panelists.
Yeah.
And one that wasn't tied to a specific sort of existing review site, or one that wasn't tied to a specific convention.
Yeah.
But that was simply a way for, a panel of judges to highlight and recognize some great games that were published, in a calendar year, right? To say, hey, these are some really cool games that we think are worth your attention. And I think the hope is, that it's a way to bring a little more recognition to some particular games that we've enjoyed. Mm-hmm. As like, for me as a reviewer, I see a lot of really great games, and I can write a review about it and I can share it. But I think having something that goes outside of GeekDad, like my little bubble, right, to give a recognition to some games, that's kind of cool to me, right? It's like we do our GeekDad approved seals, and we have a Game of the Year, and there's only one award for that. There's no categories, which is difficult. And so I really jumped at the chance to say, hey, here's another place where I can, I think I can lend a little of my sort of knowledge and background and my reputation toward boosting a game that I like.
Are you going to be head judge then? Have you decided who's going to be head judge? And is there going to be a battle over who's going to be head judge? And is it going to end up with there being a splinter between the awards? So there's going to be the American Association of Tabletop Awards of America, and then there's going to be the American Tabletop Awards of America awards, and then you're going to fight over your head judges until there's going to be like 8 separate awards where everybody's just their own head judge. Or is it Suzanne? Let's be honest.
Well, we do have some pretty I'd say some pretty outstanding personalities in there that it's hard to say who would actually win in a cage match, but
oh, come on, are you actually joking me?
Definitely.
Are you actually joking me?
I mean, Bebo's in there too. I wouldn't count her out.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out. It'll be interesting to see. So, is there going to be like are you going to have ceremony? Are you going to have to wear a frock, a dress, a nice little smart outfit to go out? Is there going to be like champagne? Is there going to be after parties? Or, I mean, when is the next series of awards? Are they just going to be kind of announced? Do you have statues? No?
No statues. Just the seal. I think the plan is that we're going to try to announce the award winners in May or June of each year.
Wow.
I know there's definitely like there's already been complaints that's still too late. But you want to make sure that people have had time to actually play the games that we're voting on. And with games releasing in, as up into December, you don't want to say, well, if you released in November, December, sorry, you're just never going to win an award.
I think that'd be a funny threat if you just put on the application.
Stop releasing games in November, December.
You might as well get the folk on Facebook really happy with how this is being run. I would just see, this is what happens. This is why I would never be allowed to kind of run any award, because people would say, now if you're going to do that, you're just going to wind up so many people, and you just see me running away going, okay, hold my beer, kind of thing.
I mean, there's definitely been a lot of conversation happening about the awards yesterday, and I know there's been complaints about not having enough white men on the board. There's been complaints about the website, some of which we've addressed, some of which we said, hey, that's a valid complaint. We'll change that. And some of them are complaints about the panel bio photos, which we say, you know what, everyone got to choose their own photo, and if you don't like it, then I guess, don't look at them.
That's a kind of a strange complaint, but I'm glad I made it. I'm only joking, I didn't make it. I wouldn't do that. I'd be like Domino in like Deadpool 2 when they're facing off against the Juggernaut. I'd just be like going, no. I'd be turning around and walking away, kind of thing. So that's exciting. So I take it there'll be details on the website and stuff like that, and everything along those lines that we can kind of check out, which is kind of cool. And we'll make sure that we link them where we can, good, bad, and indifferent profile photos as we go. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'll now be hunted down by Suzanne and murdered, but you can't have everything. So there you go. Thank you very, very much for coming on. Because I'm very conscious of the time, and you being obviously a stay-at-home dad, you're not just a man of leisure that sits around drinking martinis and having somebody hoovering the house for you. If people want to keep an eye on you on the internet webs, where do we find you on the internet webs, Jonathan?
Well, you can find me at geekdad.com. That's where I post all of my game reviews. Mm-hmm. And on Twitter, I'm at Jonathan H Liu, which hopefully I guess you can, spell somewhere in your...
I'll do that.
In your informational notes.
My notes of show. Yes, cool. Mm-hmm. No, I'll do that. I'll, as I say, I'll put the links where we have. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, go to the internet webs and search for We're Not Wizards, and you'll find us in different worn out places and worn out faces and everywhere else, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and our blog and at our website, which is all we'renotwizards.com and we'renotwizards.blogspot.com, where we write reviews as well, but we're not very good at it. Unless Steve's writing them, then they are very good, but stay away from the ones that I write, because I just I write how I talk. I can't help it. I don't talk very well. The other thing you can do is you can check us out on the nearest podcast catchers of your choice, the ones that have got pod in them, the ones that have got cast in them, the ones that have got neither in them, like Spreaker and Stitcher and Spotify and Player FM, and just, my word, there's millions of them, and it's a really, really bad thing. But there you go. The other thing you can do is, if you like to support the show, tell somebody else about it, because we spread like a horrible plague. So thank you, anti-vaxxers. And the other thing that you can do is you can go to Apple Podcasts and you can drop us a subscription, you can drop us a rating, or you can drop us a review. If you are going to be dropping us a rating or a review, don't give us 10 stars because it makes us big-headed. But don't give us 1 star because it makes us cry. And we're ugly criers. Give us a 5 because it's in the middle. And it's average. And I'm just a little bit average. but the person who's not being average is rather wonderful, rather fantastic. He's the Geek Dad, but he's not our daddy. It's Jonathan Liu. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on. There's only two more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Jonathan?
No.
Fantastic. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Jonathan. Say goodbye, Jonathan.
Goodbye, Jonathan.
Yes. And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll sixes, make something awful, and until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.